disease that affects your nerve and muscles and your extremities, your legs and your arms and hands, and so it gets worse.
For more than 40 years, Alan Jackson has stood as one of the purest voices in American country music, a quiet Southern gentleman who didn't just sing songs, but lived them. His lyrics carried the dust of rural Georgia, the ache of heartbreak, the beauty of small towns, and the simple truth that life is never guaranteed. For decades, he walked on stage with the calm confidence of a man who knew his purpose. But today, the world is watching him with a different kind of reverence, because the cowboy hat, the smile, and the gentle humility now hide a reality far more painful than any lyric he has ever written. This is not just another farewell tour. This is not a publicity stunt or a nostalgic victory lap. This is a man saying goodbye while he still has the strength to stand, while he still has the steadiness to sing, and while he still has the grace to face the audience that carried him from small-town bars to global fame. Alan Jackson's diagnosis has changed everything: the way he performs, the way he moves, the way he lives, and the way he thinks about the future. In this documentary, we explore the truth behind the heartbreaking condition that is slowly taking his mobility. We look at the emotional toll it has taken on him, his family, and the millions who grew up with his music. And we follow the final chapter of a country legend writing the last lines of his own story, with courage, dignity, and the same honesty that made him a star. Before the doctors, the symptoms, and the emotional goodbyes, there was simply Alan Jackson, the tall, soft-spoken Georgia boy who never imagined that country music would one day revolve around his voice. Long before the awards, before the sold-out arenas, before the world ever heard Chattahoochee or Remember When, there was the lanky teenager working part-time at a shoe store, scribbling lyrics on the back of receipts, dreaming of a life far bigger than the one around him. Alan didn't come from fame or fortune. He came from Noonan, a mill town where the roads were quiet, the values were simple, and music wasn't a career, it was a comfort. As a child, he sang in the church choir, learning early that emotion mattered more than perfection. His father's old car had a radio that barely worked, but to Alan, those static-filled songs were treasures. He admired artists like George Jones and Merle Haggard, men who didn't need theatrics or spotlights to move an audience. They just told the truth. That honesty resonated deeply with the young boy who had grown up watching his parents struggle to make ends meet. Alan understood that music wasn't just entertainment, it was survival. When he married his high school sweetheart, Denise, he was still years away from stardom. They barely had enough money to pay rent, and Nashville felt like a world out of reach. But the dream inside him wouldn't fade. He worked jobs in construction, in mailrooms, anywhere he could, always writing, always hoping. It was Denise, working as a flight attendant, who accidentally sparked the breakthrough. One day, she met Glenn Campbell at an airport and mentioned her husband's dream. Campbell offered help. It was the first real door that had ever opened for Alan, and he walked through it without hesitation. The moment he arrived in Nashville, something changed. Industry executives took one look at the tall newcomer with the deep baritone and the cowboy hat and knew he wasn't a manufactured act. He was the real thing. His songs weren't polished, calculated hits, they were stories, lived and honest. When he released Here in the Real World, in 1990, everything exploded. Suddenly, the boy from Noonan was a star. And yet, fame never changed him. He still showed up humble, quiet, grateful. He still preferred a fishing pole to a red carpet, a back porch to a spotlight. Fans loved him not because he was flashy, but because he was familiar. For decades, Alan Jackson stayed at the top without scandal or ego. His songs became the soundtrack to millions of lives, weddings, heartbreaks, funerals, celebrations. Where Were You, When the World Stopped Turning, cemented him as more than a musician. He was a historian of emotion, capturing the pain of a nation with a grace few artists could match. But behind the awards and accolades, something else was growing, something invisible, quiet, and dangerous. Small signs at first, a stumble on stage, a hesitation when stepping down from the microphone, a hand gripping the guitar a little too tightly. Nobody noticed. Alan hid it. He didn't want pity. He didn't want headlines. He wanted to believe it was nothing. For years, he pushed through, believing the music mattered more than whatever was happening to his body. But eventually, even a man as strong and humble as Alan Jackson could no longer ignore the truth. And that moment, the moment he finally learned what was happening, is where everything changed. Alan Jackson had spent his whole life believing that if he just worked harder, pushed further, and stayed humble, he could overcome anything. But no amount of grit could stop the slow, quiet force that had begun tightening its grip on him years earlier. It started with balance issues, nothing dramatic, just the occasional misstep during a performance. He brushed it off as fatigue from life on the road. Yet as time passed, those small slips turned into longer recoveries, shakier movements, and a growing fear that something wasn't right. The turning point came backstage after a concert when he nearly fell coming down a set of stairs. A member of his crew rushed over, concerned. Alan laughed it off, but the worry in their eyes lingered with him. That night, he finally admitted to Denise that something felt wrong. His legs felt weak, his feet numb, his hands sometimes stiff. She insisted he see a specialist. After years of touring non-stop, ignoring symptoms, and minimizing discomfort, he finally agreed. The diagnosis was one he never expected: Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, a degenerative neurological condition affecting nerves in the arms and legs. The doctor explained it gently but firmly. There was no cure. No reversal. No simple fix. The condition would progress slowly, unpredictably, and permanently. It wouldn't take his life, but it would eventually take things he cherished deeply: his mobility, his steadiness, and possibly one day, his ability to perform. For a man whose entire identity was built around standing on stage with a guitar, that news felt like a punch to the soul. Alan sat quietly as the doctor spoke, his eyes focused on the floor. Denise squeezed his hand, but even her touch couldn't soften the blow. He wasn't thinking about fame, money, or even his legacy. He was thinking about the simple act of walking confidently across a stage, something he'd taken for granted his whole life. In the weeks following the diagnosis, Alan wrestled with emotions he had rarely shown publicly: frustration, fear, embarrassment, and heartbreak. He hated the idea of fans seeing him struggle. He hated the idea of becoming a burden on his family. And most of all, he hated losing the one place where he always felt most at home, the stage. But his family, especially Denise, wouldn't let him retreat into silence. They reminded him of who he was: a man who had lived every song he ever sang, who had faced hardship before, who had risen from nothing. This diagnosis, they told him, didn't diminish his gift. It didn't erase decades of music. It didn't take away the love millions felt for him. It simply meant the next chapter would look different. When Alan finally revealed his condition publicly in 2021, he did so with the same honesty that defined his career. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't hide from it. He simply told the truth: "I've been dealing with this for years. It's getting worse." His fans responded with overwhelming support, flooding him with messages of love, gratitude, and prayers. Still, the reality remained. Every tour, every performance, every step became a challenge. His legs grew weaker. His balance worsened. Yet every time he struggled to walk on stage, he reminded himself that this might be the last time he sang for a crowd that big. That thought fueled him, pushed him to keep going even when his body begged him to stop. Eventually, though, even Alan Jackson had to face the truth: the disease wasn't slowing down. And he couldn't keep pretending it wasn't changing everything. His doctors recommended fewer shows, more rest, and eventually, retiring from touring altogether. And that heartbreaking realization set the stage for what would become the emotional farewell chapter of his legendary career. For a performer like Alan Jackson, the stage isn't just a place to sing, it's a home, a sanctuary, a place where the world falls away and the music speaks louder than words. And yet, as his Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease progressed, even that sacred space became a battleground. Every tour stop was no longer just about entertaining fans, it was about managing fatigue, avoiding missteps, and carefully orchestrating every movement to hide the toll of his condition. When he announced that he would be retiring from touring, the news shocked the country music world. For decades, Alan had been a constant presence, his songs on the radio, his face on album covers, his voice a familiar companion in living rooms, cars, and bars across America. But now, the man who had once walked across stages with unshakable confidence was preparing to say goodbye, not with a final hit single, but with one last tour, last call, one more for the road. The tour itself was a mixture of triumph and poignancy. Fans packed arenas, waving signs, cheering every song, and singing along to decades of memories. Behind the scenes, Alan moved cautiously, leaning on support when necessary, adjusting his guitar straps, taking moments to rest between numbers. Every note he sang carried a weight that had nothing to do with pitch or melody. Every chord was a declaration of resilience, a refusal to let the disease define him entirely. At the heart of this farewell was emotion. During a performance in Nashville, just weeks before the final show, Alan broke down on stage mid-song. The camera captured the quiet tears sliding down his face as he thanked Denise, his daughters, and the audience who had followed him for years. Social media erupted with messages of love, fans and fellow artists alike sharing gratitude, admiration, and heartbreak. It was clear, Alan Jackson was leaving the stage on his own terms, but the farewell was as much for him as it was for the audience. The final concert, scheduled for June 27, 2026, at Nissan Stadium, is being billed as a once-in-a-lifetime event. Friends, collaborators, and musical legends are expected to appear, creating a night that is both celebration and closure. For Alan, it is the culmination of a career that spanned decades, millions of albums, and countless memories etched into the hearts of his fans. Even with the disease pressing against him, Alan remained steadfast in his dedication to music. While touring may end, recording and songwriting continue. In interviews, he speaks softly but firmly about the importance of leaving a legacy of authenticity and honesty. He emphasizes that the music is bigger than any one man, and that the bond with fans will endure even when he no longer walks across the stage under bright lights. This final bow is more than a farewell performance, it's a testament to courage. It is proof that even in the face of a relentless, degenerative disease, a man can stand tall, honor his craft, and embrace the end of one chapter while leaving the door open for another. Alan Jackson's last tour isn't just about nostalgia, it's about resilience, love, and a life spent telling the truth through music. Alan Jackson's name is now synonymous with authenticity in country music, a voice that never wavered, a presence that never sought glamour over honesty, and a career built on songs that captured the everyday truths of American life. Yet, as his farewell tour comes to an end, it is impossible to reflect on his legacy without acknowledging the quiet courage that underlies every note he has ever sung. His battle with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, though personal, has amplified the significance of that legacy, transforming it into a story not just of music, but of resilience, dignity, and unwavering commitment to art and family. From the moment he first stepped onto a Nashville stage, Alan Jackson distinguished himself by what he did not do. He never relied on flash, scandal, or gimmicks. Instead, he trusted the power of storytelling, the resonance of sincerity, and the beauty of simplicity. Whether it was the bittersweet nostalgia of Remember When, the communal heartbreak of Where Were You, When the World Stopped Turning, or the playful energy of Chattahoochee, his songs became more than hits, they became lifelines for millions of fans who saw their own experiences reflected in his music. In an industry often driven by trends, Alan remained steadfastly true to himself, creating a timeless catalog that will continue to inspire generations. The way Alan has faced his diagnosis has only deepened the respect of fans and fellow artists alike. Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease slowly erodes muscle control, making walking, standing, and performing increasingly difficult. Yet Alan chose transparency over concealment. He allowed the public to see the challenges, the fatigue, and the vulnerability, proving that strength is not the absence of struggle, but the courage to persist despite it. In doing so, he has redefined what it means to be a role model, not by perfection, but by grace under pressure. Alan's farewell tour, culminating in the Nissan Stadium finale, is not just a series of performances, it is a living, breathing monument to his life and career. Each song, each pause, each acknowledgement of fans and family is a deliberate act of gratitude and reflection. He has managed to transform a difficult goodbye into a celebration, reminding the world that endings can be purposeful, meaningful, and beautiful. And while the curtain may fall on touring, Alan has ensured that his voice, his songwriting, and his ethos will remain enduring forces in the country music landscape. Beyond music, his greatest legacy may lie in the personal example he sets, a devotion to family, humility in the face of fame, and perseverance in the face of a degenerative illness. Denise, his daughters, and his grandchildren have witnessed a life lived fully and honestly, and in sharing his struggle with the world, Alan has taught that vulnerability is not weakness, it is strength. His story encourages others to confront challenges without fear, to cherish the time they have, and to approach life with integrity, humor, and heart. Ultimately, Alan Jackson's farewell is not just about leaving the stage, it is about the imprint he leaves on hearts, minds, and the very fabric of country music. His songs will continue to be sung around kitchen tables, at weddings, in cars on long drives, and in moments of quiet reflection. His resilience in the face of illness ensures that the story of Alan Jackson is not just one of fame and accolades, but one of courage, authenticity, and the enduring power of music to unite, heal, and inspire. Alan Jackson may be stepping away from the stage, but his legacy will never leave the audience he has spent a lifetime serving, and for that, the music will never truly say goodbye.